I'm Don Haas, the Director of Teacher Programming at the Paleontological Research Institution in its Museum of the Earth, which at the Museum of the Earth currently we have the New York Rocks exhibit, which will be up through the end of the year in the museum and will be online for the long haul. We have more events that you can check out at that website. You can also subscribe to our Learning Earth newsletter, which comes out 5 times a year and is targeted towards educators, but anybody can subscribe, of course. And as I said, we're the Paleontological Research Institution, and that's located in Ithaca, though I'm actually in Amherst, just outside of Buffalo. And we will get started after we, maybe I'll just click through these to speed it up a little bit. That was me 2 weeks ago. Tonight we have Seeing the Methane, Then What with Patricia Rodríguez, and she will take it away in just a minute. 2 weeks from tonight, we'll have Carolee Shumway, the director of the Center for Behavior and Climate, talking about lessons learned from behavioral science on why we didn't act on climate and how to act now. And then we'll have a Thanksgiving break, and then we'll have Rob, as he was just talking about, close out the fall on December 14th. And I am going to stop sharing now and hand it off to Patricia. So take it away, Patricia.
Thank you so much, Don. And it's so great to see everyone, the familiar faces and also new people, and just to be here in this space, which is, I hope that you have a drink with you, whether it's water, whether it's beer, whether it's wine. I have mine, but it's basically water at this point. And so, yeah, I'm happy to be here. I haven't presented formally in a while, but I'm going to try to have a screen share here and start a presentation, but something that is just a few slides, and then we'll talk a little bit about the work and why I titled this presentation as such, Seeing the Methane, Then What? And then I'll be open to Q&A and to your questions and comments. So my name is Patricia Rodríguez. I live in Tucson, in unceded territory of the Tohono O'odham and the Pasquayaqui tribes and other tribes. And I used to live in Ithaca, and this is the connection that we made with Dawn. And so I am trained as a political scientist, and have done lots of work in Latin America, particularly Colombia, Brazil, Ecuador, Chile, El Salvador, with themes that have to do with defense of territory, and also immigration issues. And so lots of, I think when I was teaching at Ithaca College, one of the things that I enjoyed the most was actually being out and in the field. And so for the past year, I have been at Earthworks, which is an environmental organization that is focused on sort of documenting oil and gas and also mining contamination, air pollution, as well as soil, water contamination from these industries. And at Earthworks, usually this work has been done for the past, I don't know, many years, decades, in the US. And so there are field advocates that focus on several different states and territories like Pennsylvania, Colorado, New Mexico, the Four Corners, as well as other states. And what these field advocates do is they use the technology of OGI, so optical gas imaging, which I can explain in a little bit more, but basically it visualizes certain gases, and there's different cameras, but we particularly in the energy team at Earthworks focus on methane as well as other VOCs. And what the field advocates in the US do is they present, once they see the evidence and they film it with this camera, they present the complaints to regulatory agencies and to government officials so that something can be done about the fugitive emissions and the venting and the flaring that often is not well regulated, but often just when it is, even when it is, it's not really kind of being implemented that well by the companies. And so they document the environmental and also the public health impacts. And also many of my colleagues also are in the, do the work of calling out false solutions, such as, the latest report, for instance, from some colleagues calls out the idea of certified gas. And as well, I think that one of the things that's important to note is that our focus as field advocates on methane and VOCs is an important one, because VOCs obviously have several different health impacts. But methane, which is something that we try to call out, is one of the most harmful for health, but also for the environment, for climate warming. And so methane is 86 times more harmful than carbon dioxide in the short term as a greenhouse gas. And so we, let me see, there's a comment in the chat that now I can't see, but let's see.
That was just me saying what VOC stood for.
Oh, thank you. I always forget that. Yeah, so we use, so I'm going to change to tell you a little bit about the this camera, right, which is the science part of what we do. And we use sort of like state-of-the-art technology, especially this camera, which is the FLIR GF320, to detect the gases that you see listed here. Hopefully you are able to see that. It's not too small, but there are about 20 different gases and VOCs that are listed there, which is they fall within the spectrum of what the camera captures. And many of these are sort of super harmful for public health and animal health and just biodiversity in general. And what we see generally is a tremendous amount of air pollution coming from these facilities of oil and gas. And so I was talking about the work of Earthworks in the United States, but a year ago, we started also doing this work internationally. And so that's where I come in. And so I've been doing this for a year, and that pilot project that we just finished now at the end of June. And so in this first year, I went to 3 different countries in Latin America. So one was Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina. working with organized sectors of civil society in many different places in these countries, and sort of going around doing field work and capturing these this evidence of pollution, which is something that companies often don't live up to, right? Like they have different levels of regulations. For instance, in Colombia, there's already rules that have been worked on by different NGOs, non-governmental organizations, but also by governments. And in Argentina, they're working on these rules, and in Brazil as well. But all these countries have signed on to what's called the Global Methane Pledge, which is an agreement to reduce the level of emissions by, I believe, 2030. And so that is something that like we kind of like, one of the decisions that we make about the countries that we go to is, are these countries signed on, that have they pledged to want to regulate and reduce emissions. And so some of the emissions, I'm going to shift slides here to show you a little bit of what we're talking about, and have a few examples. So if you have questions about any of these next four slides, which are sort of visuals, please let me know. I think G is I think it's grams. So that's one of the questions. All right, so this is two images. One is a image of a digital photo of a refinery in Barrancabermeja, which is in the department of Santander in Colombia. And so it's a huge facility right in the middle of town, of a big city, and the entire city sort of is economically dominated by Ecopetrol, which is, you know, the state company that runs this facility, as well as several other facilities in the area of Magdalena Medio, which is the area that we covered during the field work. And so one of the things I want to point out is that you can see mostly steam, and some, for instance, in this tower on the picture to the left, you can see a little bit of like smoke, and you might think that there's a controlled level of pollution, but with the camera, with the image on the left, on the right, we can see that is something a little different. So I'm going to play this video, and hopefully you can get a sense of the images that we capture as evidence. So this is a flare that is burning and emitting emissions in a very it's emitting a lot of emissions into the air. And what should really be happening is the burning of that methane that is contained very close to the flame, and not really kind of leaving a bunch of plumes up into the air. And so, like, as we pan the camera to the right, we begin to see that it's also in several other stacks of the company, emitting sometimes without any heat, which means that methane is just going into the air without being burned, and that is super bad. So
I've got a question. Does the camera, I know the camera can see like 20 different gases. Can it tell you which different gases you're seeing?
No, it doesn't have that capacity. So it's like we can assume that that like the majority of it is methane,
Yeah.
because that is a principal gas in natural, like the principal chemical in natural gas. But we
And
can also
you
assume that there's, sorry, go ahead.
You maybe said this, but is that methane production processing plant, or is that a for making plastics, or is it just for
This one particularly is a refinery for gasoline.
okay?
And so some of the gas is associated gas
Mhm.
that comes out of the of in the process. And so really what should be happening if there's any sort of implemented regulation is that methane is one captured perhaps, although we find also at Earthworks that capturing methane or any other gas is not a super effective solution, but really kind of just we've also find that implementing some of these regulations is something that corporations are not not going to spend money on, but good question. This one is from Argentina, and this is a company called Total, and it's a French company. And here is a to the, let's see, and I don't think I can move it, but one of the pictures, the digital picture, which is actually a video to the right, shows us the sort of image, the digital image without any OGI. And then we can see the amount of methane and other gases that are coming out of this place that is being fracked. And so this is an actual fracking operation, which you can then see that it's spreading the plumes up into the air in a major way, and for long, right, for long in the horizon. And these are just a few of the examples that I put here, but basically, we go around several different sites and can see this sort of images very often. So here in this particular, I'm going to stop it right there. In this particular image or video, you can see that the video is kind of sort of like moving. So that is a particular feature of the camera, which is called high sensitivity mode, that enables us to like visualize the gases a little bit better, because what it does is it sort of takes the images in fast form, and so that's why it's kind of moving. I think that there might be a question. I saw a hand up, but maybe not.
I was just going to say, so that it looks like a crane in
Yeah.
both pictures, and that is the same crane in both pictures. So the FLIR camera
Exactly.
is a lot more zoomed
Yeah,
in.
exactly. So with the naked eye, you can't see any of the gas, right, that is coming out. The next set of images is from Argentina as well, and it's from a power plant that is in Ingeniero White, which is in Bahía Blanca, a little bit south of Buenos Aires. And this is a plant that had, I found out through research that they had just installed this like really new technology of like stacks. And so these stacks in the picture, in the digital picture, look new, and they should be working well with filters that would help with the burning of the gas. But when we take this is not a video, I don't think, when we take the camera out, this is basically what you're seeing. And so in this particular moment, in May of 23, I was accompanied by two members of an NGO that is a conservation/environmental NGO that work next door to this plant. And when they saw this, it was just, they were shocked, and as many people are when they see this kind of image right, in their backyard. And then the last picture that I have is in Mexico, in Veracruz, which I took a field work trip to Veracruz just like maybe last week, and also found much contamination, much air pollution from these emissions. And we went to Veracruz and Puebla, which are the places where there's most fracking. This particular one is really kind of at the center of a community, many houses around, and it's an abandoned gas well. And so no one has really kind of looked at this, come to maintain it for 5 years. And you can see down below, there's like a container of cement that supposedly is water, but it's like, in this case, it's more crude oil than water. And so the smell is horrible. But I didn't have time to put a slide of the gases, but when I pointed the gas to the camera to this facility, to this gas well, there were clearly like methane and other gases that were being emitted from down below, from the water, right? And so you can definitely pinpoint, this is what is smelling so horribly. And so we really couldn't stay. My eyes began to burn and my head started to hurt. And I told the community members that are often around there doing their production of crops that this is really, really bad for them to be anywhere close to that. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is next door to this gas well, we went to visit this family and this man called Don Mario. And Don Mario was showing us their water well. And so we asked them to like pull up a container of water from the water well. And really what came up was completely dark crude oil. And so what this shows is that for 5 years or more, this sort of crude that is just sitting there has been sort of like seeping into the soil, seeping into the groundwater. And now a lot of folks in this community called Emiliano Zapata and others in Veracruz have really kind of no access to clean water, except they have to buy it, or they have to get it, buy it to come in trucks for the production for their crops. And so really horrible situation in Mexico. So these are some of the things one of the things, right, that we do in the field. Does anyone have any questions? I want to go to the part next to the part where like, all right, we see methane, then what do we do? But I wanted to stop there and see if you have any questions before I do that.
Any questions? Folks can just go ahead and unmute themselves if they have a question.
Have these local people tried to do anything? Or have they had access to anything to do?
That's a great question, Karen, which is what I'm going to next.
Okay.
And so, like, for us as an NGO, for me as a worker in this NGO, to be able to like give this evidence to community members is important. But I think more important is for us to understand exactly the question that you ask is like, what can communities do? And I think that one of the things that is important to note, which a lot of people do not think about, is that that these are communities that, yes, they are frontline communities facing the brunt of the impact of oil and gas being sort of, planted in their communities for a long time. In Mexico, for example, it's been at least 20 years of the peak of oil, right? And so many more years of exploration of oil in Mexico, and it peaked 20 years ago. And so now what's happening, right? Like what is the impact on communities then? What is it still? And what I found was that it was just the impact has been horrible. They are fracking more and more. In fact, they don't just frack a well once, but they frack it dozens of times, so that they can get everything that they can out of that particular, subsoil. But these are also, it's important to note that these are also communities that have organized. And I think that what I see is that they're organized in ways that sometimes we do not see in the US. Sometimes we do, but often we don't see the type of coming together of communities and organizations from all over the countries. And so I'll give you some examples. In Colombia, there is an alliance of communities against fracking. So the Alianza Colombia Libre de Fracking. And they are about 110 different groups that came together in this alliance. And they have been pressuring, they work together, they pressure the country, the government to do better. And at this point, they are trying to get past not just the moratorium, which happened not long ago with the government of the current government of Petro, but a complete a ban on any type of non-conventional drilling. So fracking, but also other types of non-conventional drilling. And they do this despite the fact that many of the leaders are being killed, are being threatened, and they see it as something that is destroying their communities, killing their capacity to survive, and they have no other option but to fight this. And so the fact that they have been going now, I think it's the fourth time that the fourth hearing of this legislative proposal, and it's been going forward, even though there's a lot of resistance from the elites and also from the corporations and from the state to that as well. Actually, the state company in this case, Ecopetrol. In Argentina, what we did, well, there's many different groups as this, also, especially in Vaca Muerta, where we went, this region in the province of Neuquén, that is particularly rich in hydrocarbons, and many multinational corporations as well as YPF is drilling like crazy and doing so very massively at this point. So some of the organizations like the Mapuche Confederation of Neuquén, which is an indigenous group that that has fought this and fought against their displacement from other lands, and now the potential displacement from lands that they live in for hundreds of years, and as well as other NGOs. And one of the things that we did in Argentina was the different strategies to try to get the information out. But in Argentina, what we did was we got 8 journalists to go to Argentina to see what was happening, to look at the camera, through the camera, and to get some media attention that doesn't usually happen to the fact that gas should not be called a clean transition fuel like the government is proposing. And so some of the things that I think are really cool to see in terms of the organization and the fight back is that groups like the Mapuche Confederation of Neuquén are starting to really kind of discuss on their own amongst themselves, but also in alliance with like different community members that are not indigenous, how it is that they see what a just energy transition is, and not from the point of view of the government or the companies, but from this point of view that like we got to start with the notion that fracking in Vaca Muerta was not their choice. So a lot of people say, oh, but you are benefiting from it. And so what their response is like, like, sure, there's some workers that are indigenous that do this, but this is not what we have chosen, right? And so I think that they fight back, and they know pretty well how to organize, and especially use the territorial rights that they have been winning through the court systems for a long time to fight back that way. And I think for in many ways it's been working. It's challenging, but it's strong. In Brazil, we allied with an NGO, Instituto Arayara, and also some other ones, and also impacted communities that they know. And the way that they have been fighting back is by organizing at the municipal level to vote against fracking, so that it keeps fracking out of their communities, but also they organize and mobilize so that things such as the expansion of ports and the expulsion of small farmers from their lands in the coast in order to make space for that expansion of the port doesn't go forward. And so there's been victories and also losses in terms of that, but communities are still fighting, especially in Brazil, that has a lot of offshore drilling happening. And in Mexico, which I just came back from, we partnered with the Alliance, the Mexican Alliance Against Fracking, and they're really kind of in the doing the work now, like a week later, which is great, of a media campaign to pressure the president AMLO to ban fracking before he leaves office. There's a chance that might happen, but they're also looking into the strengthening of a law prohibiting water from being used for fracking. And so that's really strong, and that could be something also of a strategy that could gain a lot of strength. So I hope that, Karen, I hope that answers some of your questions. Not every community is organized, but there's a lot of communities that come together and inform those communities that are kind of, feeling like they don't have a way to fight back. And so it's the unity among them that I think is so cool. Couple more slides. I just want to say that sometimes it's important to follow up. So not just to go once to those countries, to those communities, and then leave. And so been following up with some organizing events in the state of Rio, which is kind of like an area that is north of the city of Rio. And so one of the things that we are coming together for in November 8th, there is a festival that we helped to organize, which is related to that group of people that are fighting the expansion of a port and the loss of their lands. And so they organized a gathering so that they could talk to one another and decide what it is that they want to take up to the authorities, the local authorities, in this next event, which is this event to the right, which is a fair, not a festival, but a fair of social responsibility of what do you call it? Corporate social responsibility, which is there'll be a lot of presentations, and the companies will be there, as well as local officials and academics and students. And so that's kind of like a way, at least, to put it on the table that something needs to be done to stop the industry from so much damage. And then lastly, I also wanted to talk about what I've been learning about, a little bit about what I've been learning about, like, what are the alternatives to this? And I think that's one of the things that gives me the most hope, because what I hear from communities, that these communities that are organized are not just ways to fight back, but also ways in which they organize to put on the table ideas about a just transition from themselves, right? Not just the ideas that the government is telling them, programs that the government is producing, but how to, for instance, do it from the communities, right? So community-centered and community-led energy solutions and energy alternatives, such as there's a community in Guatemala, in a meeting that I went to in Mexico, that, for instance, was talking about how they have created in this locality in Guatemala several different micro hydroelectrics that feed the electricity that they're creating through the waters to the communities themselves, which usually doesn't happen, right? Like these big power plants that are proposed in much of like Central America, Mexico, all over, they are having an impact on communities, but none of that energy stays in the community, right? And so here is a way to begin to sort of shift the tables on that, right? Flip the tables on that. And so a lot of organizing, a lot of talking to one another, not just within the communities, but also sort of, in the continent. They talk to one another across countries. And so this on the right, there's also an example of a meeting that I participated in, which is called Our Future, Our Energy, which is that coming together of different experiences about community-led energy transitions, and together with an analysis of like what situation are we in Mexico 20 years after the peak of oil. And so it's just incredible amount of knowledge that is shared in many of these spaces. So I have, that's all I have. And I know that there are probably questions and thoughts that you have that I would love to hear from you. And so I'll stop sharing.
Questions, folks? Grace, go ahead.
I'd like to know how the methane is escaping from some of those wells. Some of them seem to be uncapped, basically abandoned, disconnected wells, just tubes into the ground. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the one that you saw in that image near with the Don Mario kind of pulling up the container with just oil, that is just kind of planted there, and like it's just seeping, and so you can see and smell the oil that is there. And so that is something that I saw in Mexico, I don't know, like 80% more than in other places. Like I see some sort of spills, small spills in other places, but in Mexico it's like just open, like it's open contamination that is not even only in abandoned wells, but like in active wells as well. And people come in and out, and animals come in and out, and probably drink from that water. And so that's happening, as well as just leaks that, like, fugitive emissions that are because something's not like well tightened or well working, right? And in other cases, it is venting. So venting is something that needs to happen. Like the industry is always going to vent. And that's what needs to be regulated, right? Like how much are you venting into the air without burning, without like actually like any protection for the population and the you know, the climate. And then the other part too is flaring. So the flaring is something that the industry says diminishes the impact of the methane going up without being burnt. But we see often that that flaring is not done, is like, you know, sort of incomplete, and the combustion isn't happening well, or is, you know, sort of like defective in some way. And so that's the contamination that we film, right? In no case, and very few cases actually, have I gone to a facility and seen that everything's working well, and that there's no venting, flaring, or fugitive emissions.
Well, I was interested. I was trying to see if methane seemed to be escaping from around the casing, you know, something that would maybe indicate a bad cementing job, something like that. But it just seemed that this was just an abandoned well that nobody was producing, and it was just a chimney to the source, underground source.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you close a well, it shouldn't be, you know, when you like are not going to produce from that well, you should close it well. But in many of these cases, that's just kind of like what you see is these wells that are just producing or not producing, and they're like full of oil everywhere. There's one picture that I didn't add, but it's basically a gas well with like oil all over it. And it was just like, it wasn't emitting, but I have a picture of it that like it's horrible just to imagine the impact that it has, not just on the people, but this is like in Mexico, and it's surrounded by orange production, and like you can imagine the impact that has on, you know, oranges being produced and diseases happening because of that air pollution.
There's a question in the chat from Lydia that says, I am curious whether brand new facilities are also venting at these levels, or whether the newest facilities are somewhat better designed. Yeah,
it's hard to answer that one, because you just saw an example in Argentina where the newest facility of like in the power plant, where they should be working well, they should have all the filtering in place, and just, you know, it's crazy emitting, and it's not normal levels, right? And so sometimes it could be tricky just to say, oh, that you know, facility has new things, and you know, it's still going to be emitting if there's something that that's not, like, you know, closed well, or it's going to vent anyway. But the type of the amount and the type of venting is kind of important to pay attention to.
Well, is there a lack of regulation? Is this part of it? Oops. Yeah. Is part of it lack of regulation, or simply lack of enforcement, that people ignore the regulations?
Yeah, like I was saying, sometimes in some countries like Colombia and Mexico, there are regulations, but they're not implemented. In other places, the regulations aren't enough, and they're also not implemented. And this happens in the US as well. Like, we have regulations left and right. But if the process of actually, like, so for instance, we submit complaints here in the US. We can't do that in other countries. So I don't submit complaints, but I work with these communities to try to figure out ways to have an impact. In the United States, my colleagues submit complaints, and often the process is one where the state regulatory agencies should go and inspect these facilities. They also have access to OGI in many cases, the cameras. But it doesn't happen. They call the company up and say, hey, you know, we got this complaint, what's happening? And then the company comes back and says, no, that's fixed, or that never happened. And so, you know, regulations, I think, are part of the answer in the short term, but I think just being able to prohibit certain practices and to prohibit extraction of fossil fuels in the long term, and hopefully not so long term, is the way to go. And like figuring out a transition that is really not something that like are false solutions, or that don't take into account community voices and input and decision making as well.
And there's another question in the chat from Karen. Is there something about methane that makes it especially difficult to prevent leaking, even in our new wells here in Colorado? Finding and requiring companies to stop leakage is a huge challenge.
Yeah. There's something about methane that makes it especially difficult to prevent leaking. I don't think it's like something about methane that makes it leak more. I think it's something that is inherent to the industry, and that it can be curtailed, but it just there's very little interest in investing in something like that, and or there needs to be a lot of public's demand that this happens in order for things to change. And so we have I have a colleague in Colorado, Andrew Kluster, who has been doing some of that work of submitting these complaints and really kind of following up and working with communities affected. Yeah, it's more that methane is so bad to leak. Yeah, methane is super like harmful. I read in a report, I think from the International Energy Agency, that ever since the Industrial Revolution, I think methane is responsible for like 35% of climate warming since then. And that is just kind of incredible to just kind of grasp, you know. It's huge.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, when methane leaks, money leaks, because you can sell methane, you can use it to, you know, generate electricity and heat your home and stuff like that. So it's but its systems are leaky inherently. So
yeah. And hopefully, like one day, we're not going to need the type of, sort of warming up our homes with methane, or like having buses that are, you know, natural gas, but that like there's other ways to go about it. Those are not really great solutions.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's worth remembering too that whenever you generate energy on a large scale, it's bad for the environment, but some things are much worse than others.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and Rob and I and others were co-authors of a book on fracking that actually came out 10 years ago last week. So my knowledge is a little rusty on it, but my recollection was that the regulations and enforcement varied a lot from state to state within the U.S. We didn't look outside of the U.S., but Oklahoma was more permissive than Pennsylvania, for example.
Sure, for sure. Yeah, I think I don't know how much we've worked on in Oklahoma, but definitely, like, you know, the regions that are like the most productive in terms of that, like the Permian region in Texas and in New Mexico, Colorado, Pennsylvania, are some of the places where we focus on, in California as well.
Yeah, Karen's got another question in the chat. To what degree is alternative energy being developed in areas in Mexico and South America that you've worked with?
Right. So I think it varies. I think in Colombia, this type of community-centered energy production is much more advanced and has the support of the current government. And so that is really like almost like they're showing us the way, even though there are many complications, many different obstacles to that. I think having a government that is willing to really kind of implement a transition that like centers communities and centers environmental justice is key. In other places, I think that is a conversation that is beginning, like in Argentina, and I think in Brazil it's a little bit more advanced than in Argentina, and in Mexico. I would say that there's a few examples, and some of the examples were shared with us in that meeting about the our energy, our future. And I think the notion of like this community, like this unity and sharing experiences so that they can be implemented in these other localities is part of the of how organizations, grassroots organizations see the possibilities of really kind of beginning to expand solar, wind, and other alternatives that I think are super key. Like the fact, the community that I was telling you about in Guatemala that has, I think there's about 12 different communities that are now supplied by the micro hydroelectrics that have been created, and they're looking at 3 more micro hydroelectrics to supply 16 more local communities. And so I think that is something that gives us hope that this is this can grow, but I also, one of the comments that I made was I think that there needs to be full-on support by governments, and not just like a little bit of support for it and the massive support for more fossil fuels.
Yeah, and it's I think there's reason to be hopeful with not just the scientific understanding of what we're doing to the environment, but with the advances in renewables that have vastly lowered the cost of solar and wind is really encouraging. And another comment question from Karen. We've worked hard in Colorado to improve regulations that clamp down on methane emissions, but getting them implemented is really a challenge, even with academicians creating devices to document the emissions. Getting the state and the US EPA to clamp down on corporations to comply is a real uphill battle. And it varies with administrations, I would add.
Absolutely. I think one of the latest pieces of good news from Colorado is a decision by one of the state regulatory agencies to be more transparent about the so you get certain numbers of complaints, right? And most of those complaints come from Earthworks. And this is how many we followed up with, and so like the numbers look really bad for the regulatory agencies, because it was at the point that the news was sent out, it was 2, like hundreds of complaints and 2 follow-ups by the regulatory agencies. It's crazy. And if it's not known, right, if this information is kept from the public, then people just assume that is happening, but it's not, like you say, Karen.
And Shannon's got a hand up.
Hi, Patricia.
Hey, Shannon.
Can you talk about what the corporate strategies are to foil all the great work that you're doing?
Many, but for instance, at the international level, like companies just have like so much more access than we do to government officials. But one of the things, for instance, that is interesting, I just heard the other day, is that like when we went to Mexico, the group, the alliance had worked with an agency that had to do with climate change and climate change and something else. But they had agreed to, after we went to these two areas in Puebla and Veracruz, follow it up with their own study of air quality and water quality. And just yesterday, they came back with, we can't do that. We're not going to do that. And like, it's not just because they don't have the capacity. It's like political reasons that are kind of, you know, pushed by corporations, in this case by the state corporation, to not sort of investigate too deeply into any of the matters. I think in the US, just, yeah, the power of corporations to find ways legislatively and with the regulatory agencies to just squirt the system.
Yeah, and I put in the chat there's a book that was followed up by a documentary of the same name, Merchants of Doubt, which gives a really good introduction to how corporations have misled us around oil and gas.
And then also, like, just to add to that, I think many corporations in places like Colombia and other places are using tactics that have to do with threats and assassinations, right? I mentioned some of the leaders in Colombia do the work that they're doing despite having threats to their lives and to the lives of their families. And that is just, you know, something that is pervasive. Like every place that I went to in Colombia, it was tense. It was like you felt that anything could happen, right? And that is because there's security that surround these corporations that are both, you know, state corporations and also multinational. And so you just kind of never know what's going to happen to you if you are a land defender, right? Environmental defender, or any defender, human rights defender, you know.
Any other questions?
Questions of doubt. I haven't read that.
Patricia, is in the United States, one of the things that has worked are the huge legal nonprofits that can marshal their staffs of attorneys to go after the corporations. Is there anything parallel to that in Mexico and South America?
Litigation. Yes. One of the, I think definitely there's a few organizations that are pretty big, like SEMDA, the Centro de Estudios del Medio Ambiente, or something like that. Like it's CEMDA. They do litigation. And in talking to them, one of the things that they sort of told me is that they're really looking into the agricultural legislation, which means basically the ejido system, which is being at this point like, so the government usually, like, you know, if they have a mega project like the Tren Maya, like the Maya train that's going into, that's like in the Yucatan that they're building now, they like are bypassing the ejido rights of people, so the communal land titles. And so, but some communities are fighting back. And so SEMDA and other organizations are kind of really looking to that piece of legislation, laws, to really kind of use them for litigation. In the case of Brazil, the organization that we worked with, Arayara, is one of the organizations that litigate all the time, and that were able to block the exploration of offshore in the mouth of the Amazon not long ago, like this year. And so one of the things that they said is that it's really hard to do that because the corporations really come at them with a lot, and they sue them. And it is like they have to really kind of be sure that they have something to be able to win. But they continue at it. But it's just a tremendous amount of work. In this case, Arayara has a team of lawyers, a team of engineers, a team of like all kinds of different professionals, as well as the communities that back them up, and that they back up each other. But it's a hard thing to do, and also to do long term, right?
And Marion's got a question in the chat. When you've gone to Argentina and Colombia and Brazil and Mexico working for the environment, have you been threatened?
Not yet. I have felt moments in which it was really tense. So for instance, when we were in Colombia, one of the places that so there's like the main highway, and then there were two sites that we were going to visit, and one was in San Martin, going up north. And so we go into this, it's just one road, and we start filming at a facility, and we see that the workers in this facility are looking at us from afar, and we just do what we do, and then we kind of take off. And as we were taking off and going back out this road, we see that there was two motorcycles with actually three motorcycles with 5 police on them. So riding together. And it's not by chance that they're there. In fact, when we came out and we saw them kind of going away to the other side, we came into the other facility, which was a city away or a town away. And as we were coming out of it, we saw that they were there, the 3 motorcycles, sort of like making sure that we get out of there. And so that's the kind of thing that I think gives you a sense of insecurity. But so far, no threats. We'll see. The information about our project has just come out. There's a Latin American Climate Week, which is the precedent to COP28 in Latin America, is happening now, right? These I think yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And we just made public our reports, which I can share here. I should have it ready. And we'll see what happens as we begin to have more of a public presence and of a showing of our work. But I feel like those folks who have been threatened and have had to go to exile and now are back, to continue the fight. I think they're tremendously courageous, and they are give us show us the way, So let me try to find that. We can keep talking, but we'll try to find that link.
Yeah, and I've got a question of how did you go from sociology professor to climate and environmental activist?
Here's a link. So that's a great question. Let me see how to come back here. I'm going to put this in the chat. I was a political science professor, and I was feeling that, like I said, like some of the most amazing moments for me as a scholar and as a teacher were about the field work, about being in the communities that I wrote about. And so I think being at a college that emphasizes teaching, I was able to, on the one hand, teach about the things that I was doing and seeing and thinking. But it's like I started feeling not so great about it. I think things in academia and students are changing these days. And I was disillusioned. And so I think that finding this work at Earthworks, that where I can do the kind of things that I most am passionate about, and where I can see an impact happening, is something that really, like, I feel lucky to be able to have that done that, and then being at Earthworks. So yeah, a little bit of that answer there.
I'm also a recovering academic, and I
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Maybe one more before we close up for tonight. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I've learned a lot, and just a reminder that in 2 weeks we'll have a discussion about why we haven't done anything about climate change and what we might do about that, which might actually relate to some of the ways corporations have misled us. I'm not sure if Carolee's going to talk about that or not, but I think it'll be an interesting discussion, as was tonight. And again, thank you so much, and have a great night all.
Thank you so much, everyone.